We've finished chapter 1 of The Call of the Wild, and I have a prompt for you. We're going to be organizing this prompt. We're going to be spending a good amount of time learning how to do a good pre-write. That means we're going to create a graphic organizer. We're going to be taking some of the notes that we took throughout the reading of chapter 1, our very, very close reading of chapter 1. And we are going to be responding to the prompt that I give you. And so I'm going to start that with you in this video. Now, there is not one correct way to analyze any particular piece of literature, but as far as correction goes, there are ways that enable you to be more specific and justify your argument, your position, because really, in an analysis, you are crafting your own argument, your own theory, if you will, on whatever the topic would be. So it is close to argumentative writing. It really, truly is. It's more so that than it would be informational writing. It does blend the two a bit, but it's more argumentative than anything else. So you need to have a good argument. You can think of your thesis statement as the argument you're going to make to support your analysis. So first and foremost, I've created this organizer and it looks elaborate, but it's designed so that you can just organize your writing really, really carefully. And way too few people actually spend the time that really should be devoted to the pre-writing stage. And I want to help you with that. So we're going to take it nice and slow. We are going to go through this bit by bit, and we're going to be intentional with the things that we choose. So the prompt is not currently listed here. I have it on the one that I have as the first model that I started in class, but I want to make sure that we have it here, and I know I have it on my board in my classroom, but if you're watching from home, you need it here. So the prompt that we were given, or that I created and you were given, is analyze how the exposition in chapter 1 helps develop the theme of overcoming adversity in the Call of the Wild. A couple things, just because I'm an English teacher, that I'm going to point out to you. I put the topic in quotes. I put the book title underlined. That is something that we should be consistent with. And I know I screwed up sometimes too. I did it in one of my classes the other day, and then I caught myself and I fixed it. But we need to try to remain consistent. Notice, though, that we're always told to answer the question from the prompt. There is no question in this prompt. So the first task that you have to do is one that is not really usually told to you. It's a hidden task. I intentionally phrase this prompt this way because I noticed in all of the preparatory materials that I have for things like the PSSAs and prompts that I've had in various classes along the way, many, many prompts that you will receive actually just give you a task. They don't really ask you a question. So your first hidden task is to actually figure out what the question that you are being asked actually is. So, analyze how the exposition in chapter 1 helps develop the theme of overcoming adversity in the Call of the Wild. That's a statement. This tells me what to do, what they want me to do. They want me to analyze. So, but the thing that they want me to analyze is the how the exposition in chapter 1 helps develop the theme. So I can say, How does the exposition help develop the theme in Call of the Wild? And because computers are awesome, I'm going to rephrase as a question. I'm going to paste that there because life is good when we can save ourselves a little time. How does the exposition in Chapter 1 help, to change that because I changed the wording, develop the theme of overcoming adversity in the Call of the Wild? Question mark. Now I have a question. Now I can turn around and write my thesis statement. As you become better writers, you can break from the more tedious formatting that we're going to be using here. But in order to make sure that you are actually including all of the things that you need to include, we're going to be somewhat formulaic. Not because that makes a good writer, but because it'll help you, as a good writer, organize your thoughts in a way that will be able to demonstrate all of your really awesome analyses and your inferencing, your interpretation skills. You need to learn how to organize your work in order to be able to present it well. So we're going to stick to the kind of formulaic presentation right now, but that's something that as you get to be a better writer, you can be more stylistic. But for now, we are going to take the start of our question and we're going to turn it into a thesis statement. And look what I'm going to do again. I'm going to copy. And I'm going to paste. Now, this is really, really redundant. The exposition in Chapter 1 helps develop the theme of overcoming adversity in the Call of the Wild by blah, blah, blah. And while we are going to be formulaic, we don't want to be super, super boring. So I'm going to change this up a little bit. I'm going to take this. I'm going to move it up here. And so I'm going to say, in the Call of the Wild, comma, the exposition, I can say either found in Chapter 1 or in Chapter 1, helps develop the theme of overcoming adversity. If I leave it off there, it's a random statement. I haven't made a point. I haven't analyzed anything. I've merely pointed something out. So this is not the answer. This is the Q part of Q&A. So I can follow with a by, or I can follow with because, but I prefer a by here because I'm going to state how. Oopsie, gotta get rid of that. I'm going to state how the exposition helps develop the theme. Then I can show and demonstrate that and include the because as I elaborate in all of the various points down below. So now I need to have an idea. Well, I've read the Call of the Wild and I read Chapter 1, and that's really where we have the exposition develop. But by itself, you're probably thinking, well, what about the exposition? Well, we want to go back and keep in mind the 3 questions that guide our reading. I've got so many things in here. Pardon this for a quick moment. So we are always taking and analyzing these 3 questions as we go. How does whatever we're talking about, in this particular case it would be the exposition, impact the storyline? How does it move the plot forward? How does the exposition impact the characters? How does it impact their decisions, give them motives? And why would the author have made, you wouldn't say the exposition happened, but the particular events as they transpire or unfold in the exposition, why would they have happened in that order? This is really trying to figure out the author's purpose, but also the author's craft. So we always want to keep these questions that we were responding to in our reader's notebook, we always want to keep them in mind. And that'll actually help us out a lot as we write, because as readers, we already found text that help us answer these questions throughout the entire chapter, which you'll then be able to use as you provide evidence for the points that you're going to make. So now, as a good reader and as a literary student, I know that the exposition is the setting, the time, the place, but it also includes the basic setup of what's happening, as well as the introduction of at least the protagonist, if not more, of the main characters. And all of that will obviously help develop the theme that we'll see. Now, here I gave you in the prompt the theme. On the PSSAs, they probably wouldn't actually give you the theme that they want. They would want you to come up with a theme. But since our unit is surrounding this particular theme, I figured I'd keep this for us, at least for this first unit. So I'm thinking the exposition, it helps develop the theme of overcoming adversity by setting Buck up for adversity. But that's a really weird way of phrasing it. So I need to think about how I can elaborate that. How does it do that? Not just what does it do, but how does it do it? So I take a look back, and you might have just heard me flipping some pages because I have my reader's notebook next to me, so I can look up some of the things that I wrote down. So it helps develop the theme of overcoming adversity by creating an evolving, unstable setting for the protagonist. Actually, I'll leave that out. Unstable setting, circulating characters, and evolving conflicts for Buck, the protagonist. These elements are necessary to help create the opportunity for Buck to experience the obstacles necessary for him to that's going to be kind of redundant. So, but it's okay, it's my draft. To help create the opportunity for Buck to experience, it's not even my draft, it's just my graphic organizer. To help create the opportunity for Buck to experience the obstacles necessary for him to face adversity and break just enough to have room to grow as a character. Okay, so I am personally annoyed by this, so these elements are necessary to help create the opportunity for Buck to experience the obstacles necessary. And that's just too redundant. So the obstacles he will need to face. And break just enough to have room to grow as a character. I think I can justify that thesis because I can talk about, well, write about as well, but I'm talking to you all. So I can talk about how a protagonist in a story needs to be put into a situation that will enable them to experience growth. So the setting is extremely important. If they are in a completely comfortable, favorable setting, there's not going to be much that's going to challenge them. The circulating characters. I can spend time evaluating that and analyzing how within the first chapter, the first 21 pages or so, Buck is removed from a very stable situation and he's pushed into a variety of situations in which he's not sure how long he's going to be in any of those particular experiences, or how long he's going to have to deal with any of the characters that he encounters. And that is going to do something to his psyche, and it's going to give him a little bit of instability, and it can also change his place or his position in society. And it sounds weird to talk about a dog that way, but we also don't generally have books that we read like this. So I can spend a good amount of time working on that. And I know I can talk about Manuel, I can talk about the man in the red sweater, Perrault, Francois. I've got a good bank of characters, and I can even talk about his original situation and how cozy that was. So there's a good amount there that I can really delve into. And finally, evolving conflicts. Now, obviously the conflicts are just getting started. The story would be really, really short if we were getting close to any sort of resolution or even the climax of any of those conflicts. So we're going to talk about the importance of the exposition in creating the conflicts that are going to be evolving. The exposition is where we get the setting and the characters that will help create the conflicts. So these are all going to build from one to the other, but I can spend an entire body paragraph in an essay, if not more. Honestly, I could write for pages and pages, but we're not going to try to do that. On just that setting and really getting into the who, the what, the how, the why of the setting and the importance of all of those things. The same thing here with circulating characters. This is worth its own paragraph. And the evolving conflicts. It deserves its own inspection and analysis. So right there, by including that in my thesis, I have already the format that I can then examine for the rest of the entire pre-write and for what would be the rest of the entire essay. So I've got a good start. You're going to do this, and then we're going to look back. So I'll write those in here. And I'm not going to write these as full sentences. I personally like making sure that I write my thesis statement as a good solid statement because it does do what I just did. It does give me a nice clear path, a direction. I can see where I'm going, I can see where I want to be, and that'll help me pick out all of the details necessary to write something really, really good. So, but here, now I can bullet point unstable setting. And I want to put, I forgot to put evolving. Here, I can put circulating characters. And here, I can put evolving conflicts. Now I notice that I put evolving and evolving. I can worry about the exact wording later, but I have direction now. And this is where I want to leave you for this particular moment, because now I have to go back and I have to look through my notebook and I have to start figuring out what text citations I already noticed that I can use So I'm going to look through my notebook. I'm flipping pages. All right. So the evolving unstable setting, huh? Well, I think it makes sense to start with where he started off. So the text citation would be, Buck lived at a big house in the sun-kissed Santa Clara Valley. Now, in a literary analysis TDA that we're doing, you don't need to use MLA format to cite page numbers and stuff, but for my own self, I like to make sure that I put them in there so that way I can go back and look it up and look at how that's used. So I'm going to give you a demonstration of this. I just gave the text citation, and this should actually sound somewhat familiar because we actually talked about this already. We asked this question when we first started reading. How does this impact the storyline or the characters? Why would the author have had this happen? Why would this be the situation? Well, there are a number of things that we can look at here. So when we wrote this down in class, we said he's used to a good, easy life, not hard work. So that can be used to support or prove my thesis that the story starts with Buck living a really good life. That's a statement. I can't leave it at that. The author has to include this part to, hold on one second. So the story starts with Buck living a really good life. I can't leave it at that. So the author has to include this part to show the reader the starting point. That sounds really silly to include that, but that's actually something I need to tell my audience. So it's something I need to remember to tell my audience because I can't assume that they're going to know that. So I'm actually going to write it here in my graphic organizer so that I don't forget to put it into my essay when I write my essay. You cannot assume that your reader is going to make the same kinds of connections and inferences that you do. So anything you want them to know, you really, really have to include for them. So I have to tell my audience that the author has to include this part to show the reader the starting point. This shows that Buck is well off. He is literally referred to as the king. Now, I didn't actually have that part cited, so I'm flipping through my chapter. I know it's close to that because I take a look that this is on page 4, so I'm going to look around there. I think it's a tiny bit later. For he was king, king over all creeping, crawling, flying things of Judge Miller's place, humans included. That's right on page 6. Again, I don't need to have this cited for the TDA, but just so as I'm writing, I'm keeping track of things that I need to be able to potentially look back up if I go into the essay and want to, as I'm writing, look it back up. So I'm going to put that there. He's literally referred to as the king. And the place is described as what we can imagine is almost a palatial estate. Again, the more I do to show my reader, the better off I'm going to be. by changing the setting, the author is causing immediate conflict. Physical, tangible conflict for Buck that will enable him to have problems that he will need to overcome. Ta-da! And I might even say changing the setting from such good, that's not a great word, situation. The author is causing immediate conflict, physical, tangible conflict for Buck that will enable him to have problems that he needs to overcome, or will need to overcome. That right there, I'm tying my explanation of how the text that I'm citing supports my thesis by bringing it back to that overcoming adversity. I didn't actually use the words overcoming adversity again because I don't want to be that redundant. Yes, I'm using a formula, but I don't want to be that redundant. So this is what I'm going to do. And that, what we just did right there, following our thesis, which I'm going to unbold, following our prompt, breaking it down into 3 things that we can definitely spend time examining, analyzing, and then we get into text that's going to support that, and then we explain it and make sure we tie it back to that thesis. You're going to have a ton of evidence. You're going to have a really, really strong support system for when you do go to write. Your job is to now fill in your graphic organizer the same way that I did. We're going to have a lot of the same ideas as far as what text to use, but the part where we really differ is this is my thought. This is the way I talk. This is the way I write. You're not going to use these same kind of words. You might have different ideas. In fact, you guys blew me away when we were talking about Cinderella, and you pointed out things that I never would have noticed. So I know you have the ability to do it, and I want to see you have all these ideas and be able to back them up. So we're going to spend a lot of time on this. This is your job today. To write down the prompt, if we didn't already, rephrase it as a question. Come up with your own thesis statement. It can be similar to mine. In fact, if you already spent time with me from periods 2 and 3, this is my 3rd incarnation of this thesis. I just came up with 3 different ones because I can, and it's a challenge for me, and I think it's kind of fun. And so I'm going to continue expanding this on my own, but I want to leave you the opportunity to now actually do it yourself. And feel free at any time to pause this and work on your own, or you can even keep my voice in the background in another screen and be working on your own. Have dual screens for all I care. But this is a great way to be able to have me with you every time that you're working on an essay like this. You can bring this one back up for any other text-dependent analysis as well, because the process is always the same. Really going back and taking time to think about what it is that makes something unique, or looking at something from a different perspective, identifying the things in general. Notice I didn't get super specific in my thesis or even in the main points, because I get more specific as I go. We go from more general to more specific as we organize and as we write. But now it's your turn. If you haven't already started with this, you need to complete this. If you can do this, you're going to be an amazing, amazing literary critic. Great job, guys.